You're listening to the Living Mandala podcast. Just a quick reminder to stick around after the episode, after the bell. We'll talk a little bit more about Mars and where the martial areas of the house and home are. So without further ado, let's get into it. Living Mandala of the Planets series continues with an episode all about Mars. Thanks so much for listening. You're listening to the Living Mandala podcast. My name is Aura. And the Living Mandala of the Planets series continues. We are here with Mars. Mars energy. Here we go. The Forza. So a little bit about Mars. Let's see. It's the first planet outside of Earth's orbit. So it's that first planet beyond Earth. And it has two permanent ice caps. That's interesting, right? Mars rules over Tuesday, and it's most, you can see it most notably in the Romance languages, right? Martes, for example, in Spanish, you can see the Mars. But Tuesday comes from a modernized form of Tiersday, T or Tyr, being the Germanic analog to Mars. So that's how we landed on Tuesday. Of course, Mars is the Roman god of war, of bloodshed, of challenge, of all the things. And the symbol, the glyph, is a sword and a spear. A spear and a shield, not a sword. A shield and a spear. You can just see it right there in the glyph for Mars. So again, I'm joined by Rachel Ruth Tate, a very talented local astrologer who is going to tell us a little bit more about Mars on our journey.
Mars is, contrary to Venus, whose episode we recorded prior, is our personal or lesser malefic. This does not mean Mars is bad. Mars and Saturn are our malefics. It just means that living creatures often have a more difficult time integrating their energies, because Mars is our principle of motion. It's our activity, our movement, our doing. But it's in that very space that conflict, discord, war come into the equation, as well as the principle of severing or cutting. Also, on a more productive level, the idea of crafting or making. These are all martial things. So even the adjective, right, martial, it's something having to do with war, with military in the English vernacular at this point. And Mars has two signs, a masculine and a feminine, or a yin and a yang, right? The first of Mars's signs is the very first sign in the zodiac. It is Aries, which is the cardinal fire sign represented by the ram. And I love this because essentially the first motion, right, is when things begin. And Aries is where the sun exalts, Mars rules it. It's where we say, I'm going to assert myself. That is more like the gladiator archetype, sort of the warriors in 300. You think about, like you said, the people running with shields and spears. It's bravery. It is the courage. It is the impetus. It is the action. When we think of cardinal fire, think of a spark. And a spark is what lights most of our explosive weapons that we send, right, cardinality, at each other during these times of war. But I love, Aura, how you introed with the ice caps on Mars, because Mars's other sign, its yin sign, is our fixed water sign of Scorpio, the scorpion, the 8th sign in the zodiac. And while Aries rules the head, right, Scorpio rules the genitals and the excretory system. So it's how we create and make and produce and generate, but it's also where we let go of and move through and release and detoxify the body. And so this is the yin principle of strategy, of knowing when to act, move, and do. That intuition, the harnessing of other senses, that we can receive this information and become aware of the environment in which we act in order to generate and to release, to sever in the most appropriate or advantageous ways. And fixed water, Scorpio, what is a better example than ice, right? There is no better example of water's fixity, water's ability to be solid and strong. Strength is a very martial thing. So these two signs embody Mars, but Mars' sign of exaltation is actually Capricorn. Capricorn is our 10th sign in the zodiac. It's cardinal Earth, ruled by Saturn. And quite frankly, it is the shortest distance between A and B. If we take the passion out of Mars, if we take the Aries, right, that fiery, that initiatory, engaging quality that sometimes does more ready fire aim, and not exactly the reverse. And if we take the emotion out of it, the deep feeling and the internal machination or angst of Scorpio, well, then we get Capricorn, which is let's figure out the plan, logically execute the plan, dispassionately, and with the most pragmatism and effectiveness.
Gotta love a good Capricorn. Yeah, I can see how Mars is exalted there. Makes a ton of sense. So in terms of the chakras, Aries and Scorpio are both linked with the solar plexus. It really calls to mind a lot of these qualities that you've just been mentioning, of this, this força that's our life force energy. That's not our sexual energy. It's like it's our engine energy, the solar plexus. The corresponding metal is iron, right? Which, gosh, doesn't that just sort of inherently ring true? Mentioned that the day of the week was Tuesday, and all the reasons why. The good colors for Tuesday really are red, black. Those. I very, very, very often will wear a lot of red on Tuesdays. I'm a firm believer in leaning into the energy of the day. We're chanting the name Tuesday all day long. I'm just going to go with it. I'm not going to go against the grain. So I will often wear all red or black on Tuesdays and just kind of lean into it. I'm a child of Mars myself. I have an appreciation for the martial energy when it doesn't bite me in the ass. Okay, in terms of the runes, the one that I would associate with Mars would be the Tiwaz rune. So it's an arrow basically that points straight up, and it's the warrior rune. So it's the rune, the spiritual warrior. It's all about victory. It's related to the North Star. It's about there's something to do here, and I am a warrior. I'm a spiritual warrior. And the color associated with this rune is bright red. So I would associate the Tiwaz rune for those reasons. In terms of the tarot deck, the Tower is associated with Mars, right? The Tower card is often feared when it is pulled, and so for those of you in the Tower in the tarot can very quickly make some associations with how Mars and the Tower card are related. Now, in terms of yoga, talk to us about the yoga poses that you would associate with Mars.
There is a little family of poses, you are correct, that I associate with Mars, and that is the Virabhadrasana 1, 2, and 3. These are the warrior poses. And I mentioned that Scorpio governs the genitals, the excretory system. Aries is the head. Capricorn, hair, skin, nails, and also bones. Well, Virabhadrasana, in each warrior position, when I was learning these, right, specifically through the alignment, the most important portion to make sure that these Virabhadrasana warrior poses, very strong primary poses in which you're standing with the legs spread apart in different ways, they are based on the positioning of the hips. This is most key and crucial when setting up your warriors, making sure the hips are still angled forward for that combat, right? For that position of leading the charge. And side note as well, for those of you who already are into yoga and you attend a yoga studio, you can see Mars's influence most distinctly when you look at the nature of the classes offered at your studio on Tuesday. I would bet money that there are more active, more vinyasa ashtanga style classes on Tuesday than on any other day of the week.
Probably. Well, Tuesday is Election day. There's a lot going on with Tuesday. It's the second day of the week of the, kind of the regular work week. But this 7-day week thing is from ancient Babylonia. This isn't a modern invention. And the fact that we are able to all sync up our timepieces globally, and the trains and planes and everything run on time, is actually fairly remarkable to me. That we're able as humanity to pull this off. And Tuesday carries a charge. It really does. To me, it's the one that's most obvious. Of all the 7 days of the week, Tuesday has a charge to it. It really does. And it's because it's linked with Mars. We chant Mars all day long on Tuesday. It's pretty amazing. So in terms of the orbit, when you plot the orbit of Mars from the point of view of the Earth, it's pretty, I guess, but it loses the elegance that the Venus has, that pentagonal shape. The Mars orbit is inherently agitational. It has like a little. I'm going to post it. Obviously, there'll be pictures in the show notes with each of these episodes, and I'll be posting what these shapes of these orbits look like. But the Mars orbit is inherently agitational looking. You can see how it just has a warble of agitation to it, and I think that warble of agitation, descends, transcends, whatever, onto the earthly plane, into these realms of agitation and of confrontation, and all of the kind of Mars keywords. In terms of an offering, to connect with the energy of Mars, I would offer up, for folks to look up, and I'll post a link, of course, to what's called dynamic meditation. This is an Osho technique. It lasts about an hour. It has 5 stages. You do it blindfolded, the majority of it blindfolded, but it's basically a way to sort of work up the energy within your system. There's deep, heavy breathing that you do, but then you have a full 10 minutes of basically throwing a temper tantrum. Getting down on the floor and banging your feet and really screaming, crying, kicking, jumping, all of the agitation that may be stored in your body. This is an opportunity to fully express it. The third stage of it is there's a mantra where you pound your feet into the floor, you bang your feet into the floor, and you shout hoo 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 hoo, breathing deeply, and then you spend 15 minutes freezing, which is you were talking about the ice caps and the frozen, the nature of ice, that fixed water freeze. And so then you freeze for 15 minutes and you let whatever it is that you've stirred up, you let it dissipate. And then finally, the 5th stage, you spend the last 15 minutes, you take your blindfold off and you dance. So it's a way to kind of integrate the aliveness, but also that big temper tantrum that you threw earlier in the hour. It's a way to sort of pull up, to summon that agitational energy that we all have in us in varying levels. Some of us were born with maybe more of it than others, hand raised. But it's a way to work with that energy, that martial energy that we all have within us, and then to release it, to dissipate it. Now, the trick also with dynamic meditation is to be sure later on to integrate that experience. Sometimes we do these really intense physical experiences, and then we don't take the time later to reflect and integrate. Things are going to come up, and that's a really important part of dynamic meditation. I feel like that's maybe not talked about enough. My experience with dynamic meditation is very sparse, simply because every time I've done it, something really outrageous, borderline traumatic happens after I do it. I'll quit a job, I'll fall into a fire. I mean, all kinds of things have happened to me right after I've done dynamic meditation. So I've come to really respect the practice in the sense that it does, in fact, bring up a lot within us. But the trick is that you've got to reflect on it, and you've got to integrate the experience for it to be meaningful and healthy, dare I say. So that would be the meditation offering, I guess, that I would offer up. Again, I'll put a link definitely in the show notes, as well as, the pictures of the orbit of Mars, so you can sort of see how it's inherently, the word that keeps coming to mind is just agitational. It's an agitational orbit. So anything else you would add about Mars?
I love your use of dynamic meditation. So other than the technique being incredibly appropriate, Mars's angle, so its aspect, Venus had the sextile of 60 degrees. Mars has a 90-degree angle, which to me is best expressed as dynamic. When things are perpendicular, when they are running together into a single point at that sort of an angle, there's going to be a reaction.
Right.
And with this angle, there is dynamic tension. And so the meditation you were speaking to, if you want to try a little bit, guys, just like, I want to dip my toe into some of this. Before your next meditation practice, even try just tensing up all of your muscles at once and then releasing them. Tension and release are both necessary for that spectrum to exist, right? We have to know both the complete tension and then the release. And Mars governs both. Mars governs the activity that creates the tension, and then also it triggers the release.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. That's a meditation light compared to a proper Osho dynamic meditation. All right, you're listening to the Living Mandala podcast. Hi there, it's me again. So let's talk about where Mars shows up in the house and home. In contemplating this, it's pretty straightforward. The martial areas of the home are going to be anywhere that there's a lot going on. Let's just put it that way. So I'm thinking about the garage. I'm thinking about the workshop area of your home, where you keep your tools, things of that nature. It could show up in, say, your workout area. If you've got an area of your home that you do, gym type activities and you work out and you do yoga, you got a treadmill, that type thing, that could be considered a very martial area of the home. A final zone that I was thinking about was, I got this from the Living Mandala podcast series that I did with Dr. Bill Barnard, all about the chakras of the house. Of course, Mars is associated with the solar plexus. And so I was thinking about, once again, that laundry area, the washer, the dryer, things that are transforming your dirty clothes into clean clothes. So those are just a few areas that I would sort of consider martial. I mean, maybe another martial area of a house, would be if you don't get along with your neighbor or something like that. Or if you've got an eyesore across the street and it evokes some sort of strong emotion within yourself. That could be considered martial. So take care of these areas in your life, treat them with love, treat them with respect, and also see them for what they are. So glad you're listening to this series. It's been quite a trip so far. As a daughter of Mars, fortunately or unfortunately, I relate with this planet a great deal. I have a lot of respect for it and appreciate your time today. Thanks so much for listening to the Living Mandala podcast.